Did you know that in an average classroom, more than half of the students have experienced at least one significant childhood trauma? Yeah, more than half. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to empower you to look right beneath the surface of student behavior by really understanding the biology and psychology of trauma. Look, if you've ever felt completely frustrated by unpredictable disruptions or, seemingly irrational reactions in your classroom, you are absolutely not alone. Today, we're unpacking exactly what is happening inside your students' minds and bodies when they experience extreme stress, and more importantly, we'll explore how you can use this knowledge to create a supportive, equitable environment that literally changes lives.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the brain's alarm system, move into trauma and childhood adversity, look at the scale of resilience, and finally, bring it all together with practical strategies for the trauma-informed classroom. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. The brain's alarm system. We're going to start all the way down at the microscopic level. The goal here is to strip away the judgment we sometimes have about student misbehavior by understanding how every single one of us biologically processes stress.
Okay, be honest. As an educator, how many times have you asked yourself, why did that student just lash out over a seemingly minor instruction? It's baffling, right? Well, the answer lies entirely in a built-in survival mechanism. Our brains are hardwired to keep us safe, but sometimes that wiring gets a little crossed.
To figure this out, let's contrast two main areas of the brain. On one side, we have the emotional brain, that's your limbic system and brainstem. Think of this as the primary control hub. When a threat is perceived, it sets off a massive personal alarm. Now, on the other side, we have the thinking brain, or the neocortex. This area handles the higher-level stuff, thoughtful processing, daily functioning, and, learning. When everything is calm, the thinking brain is happily in charge, but under stress, the dynamics shift dramatically.
When you think about the biological sequence happening here, it's actually wild. The second that alarm sounds, the emotional brain completely floods the body with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. This gives the student the immediate energy to fight, flee, or freeze. But here is the absolute critical part for us to get. To help the student survive this perceived threat, the emotional brain literally takes the thinking brain offline. So no, they cannot thoughtfully process your instructions in that moment because they are biologically locked into survival mode. It isn't until the perceived threat passes that the thinking brain finally comes back online.
But here's the catch. While this stress response system is an incredible survival tool, it can absolutely malfunction. When this alarm sounds too often or way too intensively, especially during those crucial developmental years, it gets overstimulated. We call this dysregulation. The student's system just stops functioning normally, which completely impairs their ability to self-regulate. They might totally overreact to some low background noise in the hallway, or weirdly underreact to extreme situations like bullying. When stress hits these toxic levels, trauma is often the result.
Which brings us to Section 2, Trauma and Childhood Adversity. Let's zoom out from the microscopic biology of the brain and look at the student's actual life and environment to understand what's driving this dysregulation.
Now, it's really vital to clarify something here. An intense, scary event, say a natural disaster, doesn't automatically equal trauma. A traumatic event is just the shocking experience itself. It actually becomes trauma when that event completely overwhelms the student's ability to cope and leaves lasting adverse effects on their well-being. Think about it. Two students might experience the exact same scary event, but only one might walk away with lasting trauma.
This whole concept really took off with a landmark study in the mid-90s on adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Researchers found that the more ACEs an adult reported, things like physical abuse, emotional neglect, or living with substance abuse, the worse their future physical and mental health outcomes became. And over time, experts have expanded this list to include things like parental divorce, bullying, and economic hardship. Understanding these adversities is really the key to understanding the root causes of a student's dysregulation.
All right, Section 3, the scale of resilience. So, how do kids actually bounce back from all this? Why do some students recover from terrible experiences while others suffer long-lasting trauma? It really all comes down to resilience.
I want you to picture a giant balancing scale. On one side, you've got the heavy stuff, the risk factors, multiple traumatic events, ACEs, family adversity. This weight constantly pulls the student toward dysregulation. But on the other side, you have protective factors. A student's resiliency is directly tied to the balance of this scale. The lower the risk factors and the greater the depth of the protective factors on the other side, the higher the likelihood they can bounce back. And guess what the foundational bedrock of almost all protective factors is? Trusting relationships.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 4, the trauma-informed classroom. Let's zoom right back into your specific classroom and see how you can actually apply this knowledge.
Look, as an educator, you are in a prime position to become a massive protective factor for your students. You obviously can't control the external factors, things like economic security or parental support at home, but look at that top row. You absolutely control the environment within your four walls. You can choose to be that consistently caring adult. You can establish safe, totally predictable routines so the student's emotional brain realizes, hey, I don't need to panic right now. By doing these things, you are physically stacking weight onto the resilience side of their scale. It's huge.
So how do we organize all this? Well, the MTSS framework is fantastic for differentiating social and emotional support. Just like you differentiate a math lesson, you've got to differentiate emotional support. Universal approaches, those are the core practices that benefit absolutely everyone, like clear expectations. Targeted supports add that extra layer for students you know have faced some adversity. And intensive supports provide individualized care for students dealing with significant, complex trauma.
And as we implement these tiered supports, we absolutely have to view all of this through an equity lens. We just have to. If we ignore social disadvantage, we end up overlooking children in marginalized groups who are disproportionately hit by these very adversities. To ensure truly equal access and opportunity to education, targeted differentiation isn't just some nice bonus idea. It's a critical requirement for a fair and equitable classroom.
I love this idea here, coupling prevention with mitigation, basically harm reduction. Obviously, in a perfect world, we'd prevent all exposure to trauma, but we know that's practically impossible. Students are going to face hardships outside of school. But here is the most empowering part of all this. A trusting relationship with a teacher like you can literally mitigate the harm when adversity inevitably strikes. You reduce the impact of their trauma just by being a safe harbor.
So as you step into your classroom tomorrow, I want you to really think about this. Building trusting relationships and predictable routines can literally help bring a dysregulated student's thinking brain back online. The biology proves it. You have the power to tip a student's scale toward resilience. The only question left is, how will you choose to be that vital protective factor for someone today?